Hey, everybody. Welcome to this Dapr community call. My name is Cecil Phillip, and I am really excited because we actually have all of our community managers here today. So it's a beautiful day when we have a full house of folks. So
Definitely. It says, Cecil, you appear to be frozen. That's probably not in real life that you're frozen, right?
oh, that's horrible. Let's see how we can sort that out. What's going on with this camera?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we can hear you. We can. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, different camera.
Is the camera back?
I mean, technology is hard. We all know that. So that's
Technology
okay.
is definitely not totally sure why that is doing that. But anyway, you all don't need to see me. I am not important. So my name is Cecil Phillip. We have Mark here, who is also a community manager, and also Dana. So say hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
And we have a really special agenda for you folks today. We're going to be talking about Dapr Agents. And so today we're going to have Roberto and Yaron. They're going to pretty much let us know all about like what Dapr Agents are and probably give us some really fun and interesting demos about, what that looks like and what the developer experience is. And then Dana, we're going to dive into some of the community show and tell. So I know we, not a super packed agenda, but I guarantee you there is a lot of things to talk about. So why don't we just go ahead and get into it?
Yeah, welcome, Yaron, and welcome, Roberto.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I will stop sharing my slide and then...
Yes.
Here we go.
All right, we're good, yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Yaron Schneider. I am a Dapr core maintainer, and together with me, I have here Roberto, a new Dapr maintainer as well. Roberto, how about you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Yaron and everyone. So really happy to be here. My name is Roberto Rodriguez, known in the community as Cyber War Dog in the cybersecurity community, and also ex-Microsoft employee. I'm gonna announce in a week where I'm going, but happy to be here and then share a little bit more of all this like amazing stuff with agents and Dapr.
Yeah. So in order to introduce Dapr Agents to the Dapr audience and anyone who might be new to Dapr and just interested in AI, we're going to host a conversation where I'm essentially going to be interviewing Roberto, and we're going to have a chat about AI agents, how Dapr fits into it, what we've been doing. And so I think really to set the stage, last week, I think it was, the CNCF, I'm losing track of time, the CNCF introduced or announced together with us the Dapr project about a new framework called Dapr Agents, which is essentially allowing developers to write agentic AI systems and also agentic workflows. And these are two distinct things that Dapr Agent supports, and we will deep dive into how Dapr supports both of them today. And this is really exciting because this is based on my own personal knowledge. If I'm mistaken, please post in chat, but I think it's the only vendor-neutral agentic AI framework in existence today. And even if it's not, it's one of the few ones out there, which is really, really important because when you're running agentic workloads, you want to make sure that they're vendor-neutral, they play nice with all of the LLM providers, they run really well on all major clouds, they integrate with all services. And so this is a really, really big stepping point, both for the Dapr project and also the CNCF ecosystem. Now, let's talk a little bit about how all of that started. Dapr Agents was essentially previously named Floki, which was a project that Roberto here started during his time at Microsoft. So Roberto, my first question to you would be, how did this start? How did you come up with this idea to layer an agentic AI framework on top of Dapr? And then, of course, Floki was donated to CNCF, to Dapr, so to CNCF through Dapr, and we're immensely thankful for that. And so tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I think that in general, my kind of like research path was going into trying to build agentic systems. I mean, with my time at Microsoft, the goal was to enable autonomy via agents, right, to protect Microsoft, right? So try to build all these systems that could support analysts, security, incident responders, etc. And to me, like there was a lot of different frameworks out there, but one thing that I wanted to do was to build my own because I learned by building things. And so, to me, initially, I was trying to build my own little Python package, trying to figure out how to define an agent, how to give it tools, how to point to a language model, for example, via OpenAI or Hugging Face models, etc. But as I was building the system, to me, it was pretty clear that it was not going to scale, right? The moment you try to build, these systems that need to communicate with each other, not exist only on one computer locally, only on my computer. They need to be deployed maybe in the cloud, on edge. So all those questions started kind of like to make me think, you know what? I need to build also my own kind of engine to do all of this, and not just keep it as a Python package that doesn't do much, but just running a couple of Python classes. And so I started digging into all these other frameworks, and I wanted to figure out what core components of an agent they kind of like build their own solutions for. So for example, concepts like state or like memory or like durable tasks or like communication between agents. That's something that I see a lot of solutions out there that are just building their own, when all of these capabilities have been built for years already for projects like Dapr that battle tested, proven to scale. So to me, kind of switched my mind from let's build my own to say, why don't I just leverage what is already out there, which is already open source, and then also kind of learn a new technology. So everything started there, just to kind of take my initial POC, kind of like an MVP, to the point that I wanted to make it scale. And a lot of the well-known solutions out there, to be honest, they're really great to do demos. They're amazing, like when they show you everything happening in one screen. But the moment you want to decouple all of that and also be able to swap components of the agentic system with different cloud providers, different databases, it is not that easy. So anyways, that's the beginning of kind of getting into why I built this, and happy that I did it also, because I got to meet the community, the Dapr community, coming from the cybersecurity community. We don't do much on the Dapr side or in that area. So it was nice to dive into those use cases.
Yeah, great stuff. And you actually did something that we want every developer to do, and that is not build their own framework, not reinvent distributed tracing, not reinvent durable execution, not reinvent state management. And so Dapr, we've seen really become this infrastructure layer for lots of other projects out there, like Open Functions in the CNCF, the sister project to Dapr that really built upon Dapr to provide like this FAS model. Knative has an integration with Dapr, and we're seeing more and more of that coming up. And so seeing Floki come up with the agentic AI direction was really awesome. And if you really think about it, agents are essentially multi-step executions of tasks, and that is a workflow. But eventually you could say any type of application logic is a workflow. In 1.15, Dapr 1.15, we've introduced workflows as a stable API in Dapr, which can now scale to thousands and tens of thousands of pod in a Kubernetes cluster with low latency and high throughput. And that really serves as an amazing point for agents because, first of all, these agents are lightweight. We'll explain why in a second. But also, it integrates natively with Kubernetes. So it meets enterprises where they are. And as you mentioned, Roberto, a lot of these agentic AI frameworks out there today, I'm going to mention names because, first of all, we're respectful and we want to get along with everyone. But a lot of them just do not perform very well when you're taking them into production. But Dapr is battle tested with lots of major enterprises, with workflows, with actors, with state management. And so when you layer a framework like agentic AI on top of Dapr, you get all of the things that are battle tested and have been fire trialed by so many users out there. So this is really, really great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and then of course, when you talk about workflows, the concept of an agent, it's like multiple steps that a lot of people say it's like so random and like very autonomous. But the core components, there is always like a core workflow, right? That you could actually orchestrate and then let the models, the language models, to decide maybe what to do next. But there is always these like core components that in my opinion, you need to have some type of capabilities to like, retry the task, right? To be able to keep the state of like what's going on. If something fails, how do you get back to it? All of those things, once again, building your own agentic framework, it's great. But then once you get into the how reliable it needs to be for every single step of the workflow, even something as simple as a sequence of steps. It's something that you have to build your own thing. So anyways, I just wanted to put that out there, because when we talk about workflows and agents, there's a lot of debate into like, what's a workflow, what's an agentic workflow. But anyways, so it's kind of like the beginning of Floki to build something that would allow me to provide that kind of reliable service for every single step that I take, right, with my agent.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point. As agents become more autonomous and they have less human supervision, because that's the whole point, right? We want to be able to automate. Like agents is kind of like the epitome example of automation, really.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that if you trust your business process to execute by an agent, it needs to run to completion. And if it fails for whatever reason, a network outage, a cloud provider region going down, and an upgrade that someone scheduled for the wrong time, a pod crashing. I mean, on Kubernetes, pods are ephemeral. For whatever reason, you want the agent to be able to pick off where it left off and not need to, repeat the entire thing all over again, or heaven forbid, lose the entire state and then just, cancel the entire business workflow, which is why workflows are so important as a vital infrastructure layer to agents. And this is what Dapr has at the very core of it. Now, you could just use Dapr workflows, pure Dapr workflows, and write agentic AI on top of that. But then you also need to figure out the agentic AI side of things, which is why Dapr Agent is so crucial, because it combines the best of both worlds. It has the Dapr workflow side of things, and it combines it with really advanced features that we have on there, right? Like PDF extraction and the ability to reason and do like thought-based processing and all of that stuff that you need when you're writing agentic AI. And now you're getting really the best of both worlds. So this is amazing to see. I also think that there's, two types of like patterns of agentic today that people are still kind of like trying to figure out what the difference is between them. And that is like an assistant agent, right? Which is an agent where you give it a few instructions and you give it a bunch of tools, and the agent receives a prompt and it figures out what to do, and it reasons, and it's like a multi-step workflow inside of it, and it might reach back to the user and get like a direction of what to do next. But then we're also talking about agentic workflows, which I think people are discovering they need more and more like granular control about the individual steps that an agent takes. And it's important to know that Dapr Agents actually supports both. So we have this, fully fledged assistant that will take instructions and talk to multiple agents and pick the best one, and also connect to the right tool and do all of that for you. But if you need something more advanced and more granular control, we also have agentic workflows, which is also a programming model that's supported by Dapr Agents. And it was really amazing to see that.
Yeah. And then one part that you mentioned that it's also, to me, very important to discuss is that when you talk about like you can build things with workflows right by itself, but to me there is also all these other components that the Dapr ecosystem kind of brings to the conversation, right? It's not just durable tasks, but then how do you orchestrate that with some like messaging system, for example? How can you provide some of those clients or APIs to like other services in other providers, right? So there's a lot of that to me that it was kind of like interesting to dive into Dapr, because it was not just about orchestrating things. It was about connecting things with other things. And I think that was the key, right? Like how you bring all of this whole ecosystem of APIs, and yeah, fascinating. So I fell in love, to be honest, at the beginning when I was like building things. I was like, oh man, this is the thing. And I didn't know where it was going to go. It was just like a, basic project just to kind of start learning a little bit. But then it kind of became this big Frankenstein solution, and now like bringing it to other folks that have shared their experience and how things need to be done. Also, I think that that's also the beauty of the community of Dapr, right?
And you mentioned like Frankenstein. Let's talk about monoliths, because if you think about agents, you can kind of like equate them to microservices, right? You might have different agents responsible for a different task, and you don't want to create a monolith agent, which is starting to happen today. You want to essentially be able to create boundaries and isolation and break down logic and create reusable agents. As a programmer, we've been thinking for years about what's the perfect abstraction. So we've had domain-driven design and contextual bounds and all of those concepts to try and, like really encapsulate business logic and separate it from other business logic. And somehow always infrastructure made its way and things got bundled and we had dependencies, and no one could ever arrive at the golden elixir, like the perfect architecture out there. And I think for agents, it actually presents a really, really good opportunity to have a business that's encapsulated in a proper way, because an agent is essentially something that takes, a task and delivers it end to end. So like your contract is very specific. And so I think agents are actually the epitome example of how we would do domain-driven design with AI. So it's kind of like exciting for me to see that coming up. And when you have multiple agents, of course, you want to have them, be able to communicate with each other. And communication is important. And so if one agent tries to connect to the other and the message doesn't get there, your entire multi-agent flow essentially halts to a grind, and then you're no longer autonomous. You need a human in the loop to essentially fix it and deep dive and see why the message didn't get there. And so using Dapr PubSub, like we've done in Dapr Agents, is extremely important, because Dapr PubSub is highly reliable. It'll make sure that when agents collaborate together, one message will actually get to the other agent. So that's, an amazing thing, where we have all of these reliable Dapr building blocks playing together to provide this really foundational layer to the agents. Before we talk about the deep dive, do we have any questions from anyone so far?
I have some questions, but I was trying to be polite and kind of wait for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
When I kind of look at Floki, well, I'm sorry, I can't call it Floki anymore. When I look at Dapr Agents, Yaron's gonna be mad at me now. When I think about Dapr Agents, it's very different from a lot of the other building blocks and things that we have in Dapr itself, right? Like I don't think there's another example of a framework per se on Dapr. If you look at PubSub, if you look at configuration, you look at even workflows, right? Like they're all very different. And so I guess both Yaron and Roberto as well, I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on, extending Dapr in ways that we haven't done before, right? Like we haven't built a framework on Dapr before. We haven't given developers this type of opportunity and capability. And so kind of looking at it not just as us getting in the AI space, but also evolving Dapr to have some more of these opinionated frameworks on top of it. I'm looking forward to hearing like what y'all think about that.
Yeah, no, it's a really good call out. And we do have examples of frameworks built in Dapr, but you're right, not in the Dapr project itself. So OpenFaz is an example of a framework that was built on top of Dapr PubSub, and I think service invocation or configuration, maybe state management too. And that framework basically layers on top of Dapr. It's in the CNCF, but it's not part of the Dapr project. And so I think now we're seeing how Dapr's architecture really lends itself well to powering other projects, and not just being a developer, facing tool where we give developers tooling to their toolbox to do things like service invocation, PubSub, and workflows, but it also serves a higher purpose. So we see higher level abstractions really hitting the Dapr project through things like Floki turned into Dapr Agents. And I personally expect to see more and more of that, because it just proves the point that the API abstraction layer of Dapr is architected well enough to support these really complex workflows. Because if you look at Dapr Agents, it is a complex framework. And if Dapr is able to provide those APIs, to that framework, then it means it will probably be able to provide these APIs to other frameworks as well, in other verticals too, not necessarily AI, but it seems to be working really well there too.
Yeah. And so to me also, it's the evolution of Dapr too, like as the building blocks and the APIs that have been released recently, right? Like the conversational API, for example, kind of like I see that there is all these little components that are kind of going in that direction, that it kind of makes sense to say, if the Dapr community understands all of these components very well, let's stick them together and then see how we can define what a real workflow should be from a Dapr perspective. So I think that guiding and leading on that, the community, I think that's going to be very important, because right now there are not standards to how to define all of these agentic systems, for example. Like everybody builds their own, everybody has their own language to even define workflows. So to me, Dapr kind of brings that common language for developers to say this is how we build an agentic system, right? And then the logic depends on the business. But so to me, that's where I see this. It's kind of like the evolution of all these other components that have been built for years, right?
Yep. And what are some of the key features we actually have in Dapr Agents? We can start talking about some of them. To me, I think the lightweight nature of it is really, really important, because AI is expensive enough to run, right? Especially if you're hosting your own models and you're using a lot of GPUs. You don't want to use a lot of CPU to run the thing that actually inferences with the GPU-based models. And Dapr Agents is built on top of Dapr Workflows, which is built on top of Dapr Actors. We actually have a model which allows you to use actors as well. But for this purpose, let's mention the workflows part of it. So Dapr Agents essentially builds on top of Dapr Workflows, and so each agent and each task that the agent runs is essentially an actor. And an actor is a model of a small unit of compute and state that is highly distributed, is concurrent, and Dapr can essentially orchestrate millions of those inside of a single cluster. I've personally witnessed 12 millions of those concurrent objects in an 8-pod system on a 16-core machine. And so you can think that you can have millions of agents running concurrently inside of a cluster, which lends itself really well because Dapr can reclaim those resources. So let's say you have a collaborative multi-agent system where you have an orchestrator agent that reasons about what to do, and then it understands, oh, I have another agent as a tool, and I need to now call that agent. That agent does its job. Once it's done doing its job, it can get reclaimed by the system. CPU goes away, it scales down to 0. Then the main workflow agent can continue off to another agent or to a bunch of agents to just continue the processing. And then these agents scale back to 0. And then when another request comes in, that actor will spin back up. And it's a matter of double-digit or triple-digit milliseconds, but it's very, very fast because the actors are very lightweight objects. And once they reincarnate in the cluster, they will grab their own state, they will hydrate, they will continue where it left off. And that's really the basis for Dapr workflows and the layer that orchestrates agents. This was probably very lucrative for you, Roberto, when you were doing this to begin with.
Yes, definitely. I think that was there were a lot of components that. Do you think that it would be great to maybe switch to the repo and maybe show the components a little bit to kind of start that context? All right, so let's do that. Share screen and entire screen. There you go. This one. Okay. So let me see. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yep.
So this is the GitHub repo, Dapr Agents. And when you go to the Dapr Agents folder, it's where you kind of start seeing where all of this is going, where it was going. And of course, there's a lot of things that we could build on the top of this. But initially, the main idea was to start communicating with multiple like LLM or like model or inference providers, right? Like OpenAI, Hugging Face, for example, just to kind of get that interaction with these models that are hosted somewhere else, or that I can easily download right locally and start working with them. And then you could see how the Dapr conversational, the API is kind of like one of those, right? But you could see that the trend was kind of going to start building one client per thing, and that's what I see with a lot of other frameworks, right? But in my opinion, as Dapr Agents gets developed a little bit more, then you start kind of standardizing even that client itself, right? So it's kind of cool to start diving into all of these different components. The component of memory, it's a similar story, right? Where there is a Dapr store, state store, where you could start keeping short-term or long-term memory. So like a couple of chat messages, like history, or a large amount of information in there. And the main one, I guess, when we start talking about agents is this one. So the agent component started as, let's just build a Python class that has all of different steps that we can start executing. And we started kind of going into, like, for example, there is multiple patterns to do this. And the main one was just a tool call agent, which all it does is just tries to say, if you give me context about tools that I can execute, I can use a language model to pick the right tool depending on the task. So that's kind of like where this folder was going into, like defining all the multiple patterns that at the end turn into workflows. And then, as Yaron was talking about, there is some concept of actors, just to kind of wrap that agent around the concept of an actor and simply expose it and communicate with it, right? But then at the bottom is when you start kind of diving into the concept of a workflow. And from a workflow perspective, right, we start defining how can we communicate with different agents. There is the concept of an orchestrator, which is going to be the system that is going to try to figure out who's next, for example, in the communication like system. And then the agent itself is just that like assistant that you can, you know, wrap around tools and be able to let it figure out what it is, right, that it could do. And if you dive into the concept of an assistant, for example, the assistant itself is just a workflow, right? So it starts from here. And a workflow that is going to have some type of message router, which says if there is a message to a specific topic that I'm listening to, I want this workflow to run, for example. And then the logic itself is just kind of like trying to figure out what to execute first, what to execute next, try to interact with LLMs, for example. And then at the end, you can see that there is the concept of every single main task is going to be decorated with a task decorator, which is the kind of like abstraction of the workflow activity, which the difference is that you can add concepts such as simply defining a, for example, let me show you one in a little bit, but you can define like prompts only as a task, and underneath it can be calling the Dapr, you know, conversational API, for example. So it kind of like improves the way how you can define a workflow, and you can define tasks that rely on language models to execute, right? So this is kind of like the way how, in my opinion, you can start diving into every single component and see how everything is built on the top of Dapr components. But if you want to start diving more into what you can do with it, right, you can start going into the quick starts. And I don't know if we're ready to kind of go to the quick starts. Do you want to talk a little bit more of some of these components and dive deep into some of this, or let's just show some examples?
No, I think we're ready to demo. Yeah, so go for it.
Okay. So there is, of course, different examples that you can go through, but let's kind of dive into this agentic workflow quick start. And the reason why is because this kind of shows you the evolution, in my opinion, of the workflow activity to start now being seen as a task that that you can describe the task, and then a model can actually take that description and then start using it, right, to generate text for you, for example. And there is actually one slide that I had in here as we were kind of talking about the differences. And I think that this one makes it, shows it pretty well. That on the left, you can see that you can do this on your own if you wanted to. You can build these modules like Python modules or any other language that you have, and be able to just have like the OpenAI client or any other, right, like provider that would allow you to call a language model remotely. So you can do all that if you want to, but then it starts becoming this like long script that at the end you have to handle multiple things, right? You don't just have to handle the generation of text. What if you want to handle, for example, the concept of structure output, right? How do you parse that JSON object that a model is giving to you? And then how do you validate that the object actually is following the schema that you have, for example, or that you want it to follow, right? The concept of a task kind of does that. It kind of allows you just to say, give me a description of what it is that you want, and underneath is going to be the clients that will communicate with the services. And if you define the return type, for example, to be a pedantic object or a structure or a class, then the task itself is going to know that, oh, you want to deal with structure output. So let me then prepare the call to the service, to the OpenAI service, for example, and be able to retrieve structure output for you, right? So all of that, in my opinion, like abstraction of all of these steps, it's super beneficial, because the moment you want to do it by yourself and building all of this, it just starts getting pretty long. And if you want to reuse the same capability, you have to then share all those modules with multiple workflows. So that's kind of like the beginning of how you start differentiating a Dapr workflow activity and a Dapr agent task, right? And as you can see, the language is pretty similar. The difference is that the decorators on the right, like the workflow and task, are actually going to just decorate the function. And once this initializes, it's going to start registering all of these tasks and workflows, right? On the left, you have to register that yourself, which is fine, but I like to kind of make it easier for folks to start diving into this. So these quick starts kind of go through that process. And we're going to start with kind of like going through all of this, which, by the way, the Dapr community, amazing to help putting all of these things together. And what you're going to need, of course, depending of which client are you going to use to call a language model, you need an OpenAI API key. And you can put that into that environment file. And that's something that you can just have in your directory so that you don't have to write hard code all those keys in your code. At the end,
Roberto, I will just chime in for a second and say that, for brevity, we use the OpenAI key for the examples, but you can actually configure Dapr agents to use a whole wide of clients, including Dapr, which can support DeepSeek, Anthropic, Mistral, Hugging Face, 11 Labs, NVIDIA, and so forth.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of that, right? You can just, point to it and get the variables ready, and then you could just start using this with different clients, right? So then you define your components for your workflow. And then something like this, which could be very basic. It's something that you can run with Dapr Agents. As I mentioned before, the task is just going to get the prompt, and it's going to treat it as a prompt and simply, get you some, some output in here. So how do we run this? This is going to be the Dapr, sequential workflow. So let's just do that real quick. Let me just make sure this is nothing in there. All right, so we can just run the sequential workflow. So we are in the folder, the 04 agentic workflow quick start. And we can just do Dapr run. We just give an ID. We just call it sequential. And then resources, path, components. Let's do, and this is going to be sequential workflow. So this is going to register the tasks, the workflow underneath. And as you can see, automatically, it gives me a line, a famous line by Legolas from a Lord of the Rings. So I'm a big fan, even though my initial project had nothing to do with Lord of the Rings, but I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. And in this case, there is not much that you were able to see in here, but pretty much what we were trying to do is, if you go to the sequential workflow again, right, all we were trying to do is task number 1, give me a random character from Lord of the Rings, and the task number 2, what is a famous line from this character. And you can see that programmatically, right, it's very easy just to say, give me the output of task number 1, and I'm going to pass that as a variable or as an input for task number 2. And the beauty of Dapr Agents task is that you can define the variable as if you were defining a parameter, right, for your task, which comes from the previous task, and that could be part of your prompt, right? So everything that is defined as a parameter is going to be a substitute, right, when it comes to the workflow. So that way of programmatically feeling that you're actually writing code to define a workflow and not think about any other things when it comes to calling language models. I think that was what kind of started clicking when I was building this framework. So that was very simple. But then we can go to the next one, which is a parallel, right, workflow. And this one is going to be your basic, fan out, fan in. And in this case, we're going to call a task, which is just going to get a topic. And then we're going to say, I want to generate a questions for this topic, and I want to do that in parallel. So we're going to do that 3 questions, for example. And then, or first we say, let's define 3 questions. So provide, let's see if we go to the bottom to kind of see what the research topic is. And then we say generate 3 focus research questions about specific topic. And as I was mentioning before, tasks understand the concept of structure output, which means that the output of this is going to be something defined as questions. And if we go all the way to the top, we define what questions is right here. Right, we have the questions pedantic object, and one attribute of this is questions. and we just define what that question is. So you can structure, right, how you want your output to be. And this is going to automatically underneath trigger the concept of getting structured output from a language model. And by default, it's going to use the JSON schema feature from OpenAI if you're using OpenAI by default. If not, it's going to then fall back to tool calling, right? And the concept of tool calling is that you can make the model tell you what tool to call. And when it tells you what tool to call, it actually gives you that answer as a structured JSON object. So you can use that capability to also get structure output. So Dapr Agents comes with those two capabilities, something that you don't have to worry about. All you worry about is, I want 3 research questions about a topic, and I want it to be this way. That's it. I don't want to deal with like JSON schemas or tool calling, nothing. And then you kind of get the idea of the generating 3 questions. And once those 3 questions are going to be generated, it's going to be here. So now this question is going to be an array. So now I can say, generate content around those 3 questions, but do it at the same time, right? So using the fundamentals of fan out, fan in, fundamental workflow pattern, you can accomplish the same thing. And these are patterns that are used in very complex systems, right? And I'm going to show you that in a little bit. Like right now, it might be very simple, but when you start getting into defining an agentic pattern, the concept of executing tools, for example, happens in parallel as well. And I want to show you that in a little bit, but I just wanted to show you how easy, like programmatically, you can define a lot of these, workflows with Dapr Agents. And at the end, of course, we call the task, which is going to capture all the output of the fan out, and it's going to just provide a report on all of this, right? So let's see if we can, run that in here. So we're just gonna give it another ID. So let's just call this parallel. Hopefully I can spell parallel well. Let's call it fan in. Fan out. Let's see. Fan out, fan in. And there you go. And then we're gonna call this. We're gonna call this specific one, and it's gonna do the same thing. It's gonna register the task. It's gonna register the workflow. Meanwhile, it does this because you can see all the LLM-based tasks being executed in parallel, right? If we go all the way up, you can see that it starts registering the activities that were decorated and also the workflow, right? Because it's looking for the functions in the script that were decorated with the workflow or the task. And you can see that it's calling the chat completion API in parallel, and is getting context around each question for the research topic, and then it's going to do the summary, right? And that's it. So it just provided this whole research report about the environmental impact of quantum computing, which is going to be interesting to dive into as well. So these 2 basic examples kind of shows you how easy and powerful it is to define multiple LLM-based tasks, but still it's not showing a lot of autonomy. But it's still taking the concept of, once again, executing a basic operation to now be driven by an LLM or by a language model, right? It could be a small language model or a large language model. Do you want to stop real quick? Any questions maybe, or do we just dive directly to the next demo?
No, I think this is great. I will just say, since this is using Dapr building blocks, you get tracing, you get metrics, you get all of the Dapr goodies. For your state store, you can put resiliency policies and all of that good stuff. So you talked about autonomy. Maybe let's take a look at the assistant agent.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see if we can do that in here first. Yeah, there you go. Fan out, fan in. So what you were saying, Yaron, is like how by default, and this is something that you don't get by default with a lot of different frameworks. And this is not just This is not just gonna be the LLM or the model API call, but this is actually tracking the task itself that is being executed. And a lot of people don't track that. They only track the API call, which is fine. I mean, that's amazing because you want to know what the input and output was. But at the same time, I want to know which one failed, which one got retried, and all of that, right? And you get that by default with Dapr, right? Telemetry. All right, so let's move to the next one. So this one is going to be, so for that, I would love to share some context into what that means, is that when we talk about the concept of agentic, if we go to this, for example, a workflow, it could just be a bunch of tasks and there is not much reasoning around it. One agentic workflow means that some of these tasks require some reasoning, some thinking. Is this something that I need to execute first, second? And the concept at the end of the third workflow is, which tool do I need to use to act in this environment and be able to observe what's going on in this environment? And based on my observations, I can decide, I can think about it, and I can decide if I can stop or if I can pick the next tool. That's when you start thinking about the concept of an agentic workflow. And you can build an agentic workflow with these three fundamental, core workflow patterns. And that to me is the fascinating part that not a lot of people talk about, right? There's just a lot of different workflows being designed, but if you think about it, you're just kind of like putting all of these three together. And when we talk about the concept of an agent and a tool, it's very important to understand that the role of the language model is to decide which tool is the best tool or the next tool to execute at a specific time, right? It's not that the model is executing the tool, right? Keep that in mind. Yeah. And when we start thinking about what a tool means, it's actually a blueprint or context around the type of parameters, the input that this actual tool is going to need. You need to provide the name of the tool, which is going to provide context to the model to know, oh, this tool might be the best for this task. And you provide a description, which is more context for the model to say, this is the right tool because based on my natural language understanding, the question is related to this tool. That's pretty much what we mean with a tool, right? It doesn't mean that the model is going to pick the actual code and execute it. It just reads context from the tool in order to make a decision when this tool can be executed, right? So we're going to go through this specific example where there is a pattern, which is called the tool calling pattern. And the basic thing here is that, as I was mentioning before, you think about the task, you think about what to execute, and once you execute the tool, you observe the output, right? And this can go in a loop for multiple iterations. The way how it works with the function calling features of OpenAI is like this, is where you pass a message, you say, these are the tools that you can use. The model decides which tool, the agent executes the tool, and then you provide the output of the tool execution to the model to give you a more friendly kind of like response. So thinking about Dapr Agents, this is a workflow, right? Where you get some questions, some task, the workflow kicks in, and there's going to be a task that is going to generate a response initially to figure out if the tools that I was provided as a system, as an agentic system, if those tools can be used for the task. So the next task is going to be, let's check for tools that the model might have suggested to run. And if there is a tool, right, we get the tools, and some of the tools are provided in a list of tools, which means that you can execute those in parallel, which to me is amazing because the language model is deciding, do I just give you one tool or I give you 5 tools? Like, depending on the task. If the task requires you to run a tool one at a time to kind of say the output of the first execution is the input of the next one and so on, the model itself is going to give you that. It's going to give you one tool. But if the model says, you know what, you can execute multiple tools because your task, you can just get all of that at once. There is where the workflow is going to be able to then do that in parallel. So far, you are kind of mixing the concept of a basic task chain with some fan out, fan in. And then if the model is not done yet, it needs to go back to the top and start doing the same thing. Based on my current state, do I have to execute another tool or can I just respond to the user right away? And we can use the monitor pattern, right, using the continuous new API. And that's pretty much what your tool calling, right, workflow is, right? So we can run this. Let me just go directly to the code. And let's go to the number 3. So yeah, let's just go to number 3. And this one has a couple of different, let's say, workflows that you can run. And this one right here, so this is going to show you the beginnings of Dapr Agents, where you could simply say Python 3, weather agent and py. And if you go to that one, which is going to be this first one right here, let me just move this to the side. Actually, sorry, let me just go. That's not the one. This one right here. This one is just the basics of Dapr Agents, where you can have something just to do like a proof of concept, right? I have an agent that has a name, role, goals, and it has tools. And if you go to tools, the tools are just Python functions. And the beauty of Dapr Agents is that you can actually decorate your function like this. And the function automatically will be set in the format that an agent requires it to be. As I mentioned before, it needs the name, it needs a description of the tool, and it needs to know what types of input it needs, and of course the type hints, right? And the output as well. So the decorator tool kind of like gives all of that context to the system. And one thing that you can do with tool decorators is you can pass it also a Pydantic object, and it will understand that the schema, right, of this tool can be defined in a more strict and a more robust way, rather than just trying to read the doc strings or trying to just figure out if this is a string, right, input type, etc. So if we go back to the basic agent, this is going to show you a little bit of how things were done before. So this one is saying, what is the weather in Virginia, New York, and Washington, D.C.? And you can see that the model automatically says, you can run the same tool, get weather 3 times. And then because the prompt of this agent says also to jump from time to time, it actually jumps sometimes, or sometimes it gives you the weather. So you can see how it picks the 3 tools, executes the 3 tools, and then it gives you a summary of everything that you were asking, right? What is the weather in these 3 different states, for example, right? So now let's take this into the workflow space, which is going to be this one right here. There you go. So let me just move this to the side. And when you talk about Dapr Agents as workflows, we're actually defining every single step, as I mentioned before, as a task, as I show you in the other diagram. And then it's going to be exposed as a service. And then you can just send them a message, and it's going to process that message for you, right? So let's see if we can run this real quick. So that would be Dapr run. Let's see, weather agent. Okay, Python 3, and then we're going to do the weather agent as workflow. I think it is, yeah. Let's see what happens with this one. So this one, as I mentioned before, it's going to identify all the tasks in the workflow that we have defined in the workflow code underneath this assistant agent, and it's just going to be listening, right? And something that, as you can see in here, is actually listening also, using pops-up routing to define which message is going to go to which topic, because this agent is also listening to a pops-up system in order to figure out if anybody is sending it a message. And it also connects to a broadcast topic, which is a topic that other agents can just send data to, and then everybody can listen to that, right? All right, so then the next thing that we can do is actually call this. Let me see if I can, think I had any here. There you go. I think it's in this one. So there is a client that I put together in here in this folder, and all it is doing is just reaching out to the agent, is calling the run workflow, and it's going to give it a task, which is the same task that we had before, right? So I'm just going to run that. And then you can see that the workflow has started, right? There are tools already that are being picked. and the workflow has completed automatically. And one thing that Dapr agents do, specifically those that are defined as workflows, is going to generate a state file. There is the state of the workflow itself, which is automatically handled by Dapr, but there is also the state of the agent, right? Which is something that you want to keep up with. What was the input? What was the output? The instance ID of the workflow, right? All the messages that were exchanged. As you can see, I'm just keeping the input and the output message, right? But then when you go to the tool history state, you can see that it was calling for the tool get weather with location New York, get weather Virginia, get weather Washington, D.C. And then because we say in the prompt, from time to time, I want you to jump, it just jumped 10 feet, right? So it just decided that after giving you weather information, I'm just going to jump 10 feet, right? So autonomously decides to do that, right? And then at the end, it just provides some type of summary. And depending on the prompt, for example, this prompt can be improved because it's just saying, I give you weather information, but I'm just going to tell you that I jumped 10 feet. The prompt can be modified and say, it doesn't matter if you jump. I want you to tell me the weather all the time. That's it. And then that will fix this, sometimes ways how the language model wants to respond to the task, right? So this was a very basic example of how to use the concept of multiple core workflow patterns to define an agentic workflow, right?
This is amazing stuff, Roberto. And we also have many more examples. For example, how to do multi-agent collaboration.
Yes.
So there's examples that we have with multi-agent where you have multiple agents collaborating and each one doing their own thing. We encourage everyone to go into the repository. Thank you for whoever put the link on here. We call you to collaborate with us, open issues, open PRs, and I think Roberto will be on here more to discuss this. Yes, thank you for contributing this to Dapr and by Dapr to CNCF, and excited to have you join us as a maintainer, and good luck in your next job. I know where you're going. Can't wait for you to announce it.
Yes.
And great stuff. Thank you, everyone, and back to you, Mark and Dana.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roberto and Yaron. Thanks for joining, and thanks for this great demo.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
All right. I will start sharing my screen again because now it's time for some community show and tell. So up to you, Dana.
Yes. All right. We have a few minutes left. So let's go through quite a lot of things, but we'll do it quickly. So first of all, in March, during SRE Day in London, Devin will talk about Dapr. So if you're in London, check it out. But we have lots and lots of other events, especially in the first week of April during KubeCon. So a lot of buzz about Dapr, as you can see. So if you're joining KubeCon, definitely check out some of these events. Some of the maintainers will also be there. So great time to ask your questions and learn more about the project. To highlight a few events, let's see. Mark will be also there talking about deregulable execution.
More workflow stuff.
More workflow stuff, yes. Moving forward, I think Nico will be talking about Dapr in 2 events, one in Romania and one in Norway. This is beginning of May and end of May, so 6th and 7th and 19th and the 23rd. So if you're based in Romania or Norway, check it out. Going forward, I think we have
I'm trying, but let me. But I think it was the blog post.
It's not on our site today. We have lots and lots of blog posts. So I think we would like to go quickly through some of them. So of course, quite some blogs around Dapr AI agents. Indeed, we have the announcement. TechCrunch also talked about Dapr introducing AI agents. Then Rakesh had a great article on Medium about migrating from a monolith to microservices using Dapr. So if you are going through a similar migration, definitely check it out.
Sounds very useful.
Definitely. Yeah, this was ambassador post by Whitney. It's a short intro to Dapr. So if you're just getting into the project, I think it's a great starting point to, yeah, if you need a quick and concise description on what Dapr can do, yeah, definitely check it out.
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah, of course, from Roberto. Yeah.
Roberto, yeah.
Yeah, it's a excellent resource. Like if you want to do a bit of a deep dive into the process and how everything works together. Like also the quick starts. Everything is in one place here, so it's a great resource, I think, to dive deep into Dapr Agents alongside with the repo and the quick starts he shared there. So yeah, definitely check it out. Yeah, another great article. I think this one popped up today, right? So it's by Recharge, and they went through like practical example on how they scaled up their architecture to handle 1 billion requests a month, and of course using Dapr.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this was a nice migration story from Google Cloud Functions to Dapr on Kubernetes. So yeah, if you're wondering if you want to make some kind of a similar migration, definitely a good point.
Yeah, great resource. Yeah.
This is the last one, I think.
Oh yeah, and yeah, of course from you, Mark. It's the state of Dapr 2025. So if you want to look at where Dapr is, how you can use it in different applications, or if you want to optimize existing deployments, this is a great resource to make a decision on how to move forward with your project if you're considering Dapr.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's also helpful maybe if you want to convince your manager about how Dapr is used, because this report contains like tons of data that help you might convince your manager about using Dapr. So that can be useful. Okay, going back. Yes.
Going back. Videos, of course. So we had 2 more videos from Rodrigo. This is an ongoing series, and this time he talked about actors and jobs. So excellent resource if you're learning about Dapr. Definitely check out his series. Moving forward, yes, a lot of buzz on LinkedIn regarding Dapr. So of course, few posts regarding the AI agent introduction. Then we have an excellent small project from Yaron regarding visualizing async workflows.
Yeah, that looked really interesting.
Also check it out. It's I think he's gonna do some extra work on it, so we'll probably share a bit more like in the next call. And then
maybe you can come join for like a community call
as well. Also, there's gonna be another meetup where Mauricio will talk about Dapr for Java developers, and an excellent talk about Dapr from Diran shared on LinkedIn. Let's see. Finally, our Discord channel. A lot of helpful conversations there. So thank you, Siri, Vit, and Teyasvi. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. I think Siri made a contribution towards the jobs SDK, and then Vit was really helpful regarding answering questions on the Python SDK. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and then basically it's the best place if you want some help for Dapr, right? So if you have an issue, you want to know which direction is Dapr going, that's definitely the best place, because all of the maintainers and contributors are on there. All right. Take it over, Dana.
Okay. To wrap it up, I guess the Discord channel, as Mark mentioned, is the place to be if you have any questions. But other than that, you can join the community calls. And if you have some topic you would like to share, you can give a presentation and join us here. And then, of course, you can check out like the open issues on GitHub. So if you want to contribute towards the project, you can check out the open issues there and collect a badge. So here, it's not only about code contributions, but I think also you can look at improving the docs, yeah.
Or if you're just writing about Dapr, you can also submit your blog post to a README, and you can also get a badge for that. Or if you're doing a presentation about Dapr, we also give away badges for that. So yeah, we're giving badges for everything.
Everything, yeah.
Attending this live stream. So thank you very much for attending. And yeah, I hope this was tonight a good deep dive into Dapr Agents. For me, it was. I really liked it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So in 2 weeks there will be KubeCon in London. So we're not going to do a Dapr community call then. So it will take 2 more weeks before we're back. So see you then, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.